Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of Driver Seat Blog Radio. I am your host, Dave Firestone. We're going to be talking about the Rolex 24 and Formula E today, or rather, the broadcasting behind it, because I do have a couple of complaints, each individual to the TV stations in question. Now, we're going to start with NBC. As you may or may not know, some of you might not, NBCSN is no more. It died at the end of 2021, and it's not difficult to see why it died. NBC lost the NHL, so they didn't really have anything to put on NBCSN, so they decided, well, we're going to get rid of it because it's not generating money. Now, this overlooks the fact that there are other sports that are on NBCSN besides hockey. We have, now granted, golf does have its own channel, but you've got the USGA Championships, the Ryder Cup, the President's Cup, the Senior PGA Championship, the Women's PGA Championship, the Open Championship, the Senior Open Championship, and the British Open. You've got the Olympics, which is always good. You kill off your sports network a month before the Olympics starts. Way to go, guys. Way to go. Horse racing, you got the Kentucky Derby, Preakness Stakes, Belmont Stakes, and the Breeders' Cup. The tennis French Open. You have a number of college football games, including Notre Dame, which is not exactly an unknown franchise. It's pretty big. You've got the Tour de France, you got the Premier League, you've got the USFL starting this year. And then with racing, you've got NASCAR, IndyCar, the Indy 500, IMSA, the Rolex 24, Monster Jam, AMA Supercross, MotoGP, Moto2, Moto3, and the Superbike World Championship. So, yeah, you really don't have anything to put on NBCSN. And I wasn't going to talk about this much, and then I heard some plans that came out, and I was dumbfounded, stunned. It was announced that for the first time, really ever, a major auto racing race will be on NBC's Peacock and Peacock only. As a racing fan, I have 3 words: stop, no, and don't. This is a bad idea for a number of reasons, and it's clear that they're testing the waters, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But it's clear to me that what's going on is they're going to start having Peacock-only races with NBC's racing contracts. Now, as it is supposedly set up with NASCAR, this may involve the Xfinity Series in the next contract, but it doesn't involve the Cup Series. I don't believe that for a second. I think they're going to do everything they can to get at least one Cup race Peacock only. But the Honda Indy of Toronto is the race that they chose. Why is this race Peacock only? What's the logic here? I get that when you have NASCAR versus IndyCar, IndyCar is the lower ranked sanctioning body, but think about this logically. You have other networks besides USA that you could put the race on. Why not put it on CNBC? I mean, their Saturday or Sunday afternoons, their ratings are so bad they don't chart. And you know what's on CNBC on Sunday? Because I sure don't. I've never been so bereft for entertainment, so desperately bored in my life that I thought, you know what? I'm going to watch the Consumer News and Business channel. That'll cure my boredom right away. You know, watching paint dry? Yeah. Watching C-SPAN, oh, that my heart can't take it. Let's watch CNBC on a Sunday afternoon. Give them a ratings boost. Seriously, it's when you have a channel that on weekends their ratings are so bad they don't chart. Give them ratings. I mean, this isn't. But what makes this even worse, as I'm struggling to find the words out of frustration, but what makes this even weirder is when the Honda Indy of Toronto Grand Prix is. Now, I could understand if it was during football season and you had, college football on NBC, NASCAR on USA, but no. The Honda Indy of Toronto is taking place on July 17th. The NFL isn't even in training camp at that point. Outside of the Open Championship and maybe some mediocre baseball before the All-Star break, there's no competition. It boggles the mind, and it gets even weirder. Because even if there was a NASCAR race that was on, there is a NASCAR race that's on simultaneously. But again, why wouldn't you just? You can put the Open Championship on the Golf Channel. You can put the Honda Grand Prix on CNBC. Give them a ratings boost. But Peacock only is so stupid. They're clearly testing the waters to see if this is going to work. Well, I can tell you that after watching the 24 Hours of Le Mans, it was all right. But again, you do have issues with internet streaming services that you don't have with traditional TV. And Peacock has had some of them recently with both the 24 and WWE. So again, you're testing the waters. Now granted, the waters you are testing are Mercury Creek, which drains into Poisonous Snake Lagoon. May the odds be ever in your favor. I think streaming will be the future of broadcasting. It is pretty popular. I just don't think it's where it needs to be for this to work. And again, I don't see this doing well. And plus, you're screwing yourself over on DVR ratings since you can't really DVR it. What are you going to do? Wait for Thursday to come around and IndyCar to put the whole race on their YouTube channel? Yeah, that's a great move. If I was the promoter of the Honda Indy of Toronto, I would be furious. If I'm IndyCar, I'm looking at a way out of this contract. The writing's on the wall. Even CBS has their own sports network still. Fox, Disney, Turner. They all have viable alternatives for IndyCar to go to. And let's not overlook the fact that IndyCar's ratings are improving. NASCAR's are going down, IndyCar's improving, so let's screw over the sport where the ratings are improving. I do not understand this. But let's talk about Formula E. Again, I like Formula E. I watched the first two races. I thought they were great. I like Formula E. The CBS Sports Network, on the other hand, can I ask a favor? On behalf of all racing fans, can you set your listings up so that we can automatically DVR things? Because instead of just having Formula E and then you can set up a series recording, you have to go through and manually enter it in. Well, why would you do that? It makes no sense. And plus, given that Formula E is sort of like the low-hanging fruit in American auto racing, why wouldn't you set it up like that? I had the same problem with SRX last year where I missed at least one of the races because I forgot it was on. And I didn't set up the DVR for it. I mean, come on, you want people to watch this. You want to generate ratings. I get it. Why would you set it up so that you can't just have it automatically record and then people can watch it as they see fit? I just don't understand the logic here. Should we make things super convenient for our viewers? Nah, let's overcomplicate it for no reason. And yeah, so that's my feelings on that. We got the Clash this Sunday. And I know in last week's podcast, I said that I was going to be reviewing the Clash. I should have said the Rolex 24. We've had a lot of goings on here at the house. We just had my mom's surprise birthday party the other day. So I've been trying to pay attention to like 15 different things at once. So, and when it happens, I mean, it's regrettable, but it does happen. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to talk about Nomex and its history for the second half of episode 5 of Driver's Blog Radio. I'm Dave Firestone, and I'll be right back. So I'm back, and we're going to be talking about driver suits and some of the various aspects for the first several episodes of Driver Suit Blog Radio. We're going to branch out into other things eventually. But I figured that we're going to start with driver suits, and the best place to start with driver suits is with Nomex, which is what every racing suit that has been made in the last 50 years is made of. Now, I'm going to give you a brief history on how Nomex in racing came to be. This is going to be a little bit of an explanation, but if I don't go over everything that happened, it won't make sense. So for those of you who don't know, Nomex is a flame-resistant meta-aramid material. Aramid is similar to Kevlar. It was developed in the early 1960s by DuPont and first marketed in 1967. Now, the need for such a material in auto racing had been around for a while. And as we'll see, it took 1 week in 1964 to change the racing culture the world over forever. The introduction of Nomex was the result of the fire-related death of Glenn Fireball Roberts at the World 600 at Charlotte Motor Speedway and Eddie Sachs and Dave McDonald at the Indianapolis 500 a week later. Prior to the advent of Nomex, several series had rules mandating that their racing suits or any clothing worn by drivers in competition were soaked in chemicals to make them fire-resistant long enough for a driver to escape a fiery wreck. In NASCAR, this took the form of baking soda solutions, while the SEC mandated their suits treated in borax or boric acid. These suits, while somewhat effective, were very uncomfortable for drivers to wear. In fact, Fireball Roberts' death at the World 600 occurred because he didn't wear a fireproof suit. He apparently, from what I understand, had a doctor's note stating that he wasn't physically able to wear the suit. He was in a horrific wreck and suffered burns over 80% of his body. Now, some people think that Roberts had an allergic reaction to the chemicals in his suit. However, he was an asthmatic, try saying that 3 times fast, and this actually led to his dismissal from the United States Army Air Corps basic training in 1945. Well, the chemicals in his suit affected his asthma, and so he had a note saying he wasn't allowed to wear the suit for the race. Though I'm also going to say this, given how uncomfortable these suits were to wear, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that maybe both played a part in him not wearing the suit, because it doesn't seem that far off to believe that he wasn't allergic to the chemicals in the suit. Now, after his fiery wreck, which led to Ned Jarrett retiring, Roberts was able to survive for several weeks in the hospital, and though he looked like he might pull through, on June 30th, 1964, he contracted pneumonia sepsis, slipped into a coma, and then died from his burns on July 2nd, 1964. The 1964 Indy 500 was even more of a notable incident because film of this is much more widely available. So Dave McDonald started the 14th position in the 1964 Indy 500. He dropped 2 positions on the first lap. Then on lap 2, he began passing cars and moving up the field. He passed Johnny Rutherford, who notices that McDonald's car is very loose, and he decides to steer away from the McDonald car, which was made by Mickey Thompson and reportedly was not a very well-built car. Now, when he was in 10th, he comes out of turn 4 onto the straight to complete the second lap. He moved left to pass Walt Hansen, who a split second later moved left to pass Jim Herbutris. And then McDonald moved to avoid Hansen. He lifted the front end of his car, lost control, slid across the track, hit the inside retaining wall, broke open the 45-gallon fuel tank, and causing a huge fire. His car then slid up the track towards the outside wall, and 6 more cars happened to be in that area and got involved. Now, blinded by smoke and flames, Eddie Sachs broadsided McDonald's car, which caused more fuel and a bigger explosion. In 48 races prior to this, the Indianapolis 500 had never been stopped for an accident, but the race was stopped for this accident. Now, reports at the time state that Sachs died instantly due to blunt force injuries, while McDonald was transferred to Methodist Hospital of Indianapolis, and he died 2 hours later. He was apparently burned over 75% of his body, and his lungs were scorched by inhaling the flames, which is pretty much a death sentence. And apparently Eddie Sachs's suit was singed, but it wasn't very seriously damaged. Now, after these 3 high-profile driver deaths over the course of 6 days, it became obvious to everyone involved that there was a need for better driver protection. Now, NASCAR mandated that all drivers wear flame-retardant coveralls while on track, no matter what. They also implemented other safety measures, such as the 5-point safety harness, a feature that's still used today. And this was at a time where the idea of not wearing a seatbelt in certain forms of racing was still in use in certain places. The logic here being that you hopefully will get thrown from the wreck and survive as opposed to being crushed to death. USAC, which at the time was the in charge of IndyCar, they required that cars carry less fuel and mandated a minimum of 2 pit stops per race. Now, the 45-gallon fuel tank was only meant to be a one-stop situation. You change tires and fuel once, and then you can go the whole race. Now, less flammable liquid was on board, and also the switch was made from gasoline to methanol or ethanol, which is much less openly flammable, and every race since then has used methanol or ethanol. Gasoline is no longer used in IndyCar. Now, while this was going on, outside of the track, there were people making moves to help drivers out. Drag racing parachute makers Jim Deist and Bill Simpson, they designed, developed, and released their own racing suits, which were basically aluminumized boiler suits. Like, imagine you go to the mechanic shop, you see a guy in a jumpsuit working on your car. It's that, but it's covered in aluminum. This one, I was not able to find anything about how well this was in terms of fire protection. But Around the same time, the aforementioned Nomex was being developed. Now, in 1966, Bill Simpson met NASA astronaut Pete Conrad, who, in addition to being an astronaut, was also a race car driver, and he introduced him to Nomex. And around the same time, DuPont, the company that developed Nomex, approached the Hinchman company about producing Nomex racing suits. So in 1966, Indy 500 driver Mel Canyon wore a Nomex fire suit produced by Hinchman, and it proved very popular. Simpson race products would follow suit, and Bill Simpson would famously set himself on fire wearing one of his suits to prove that it worked as advertised. After a while, Simpson became one of the dominant manufacturers in the United States, and other companies across the pond followed suit. Now, fast forward to 1970, the NHRA, along with SEMA, they began developing new specifications for fire suits using the Thermal Protective Performance, or TTP, standard developed by DuPont. These specifications would end up becoming used by the SFI, and for American-made fire suits, they are known as the SFI 3.2-A/ certification. Now, to give you an idea of what I mean by that, a typical NASCAR suit worn by Denny Hamlin or Kyle Busch or Chase Elliott is a 3.2-A5 certified suit. And what that means is it will protect the wearer from second-degree burn for 10 seconds. Now, the highest it goes up on the scale in terms of what most manufacturers make is an SFI 3.2-A20, which is usually worn in the nitro categories and the top alcohol categories of the NHRA, and it will protect the wearer from second-degree burn for 45 seconds. I should also note that this does not include undershirts, long johns, socks, or other fireproof gear. We'll get to that in due time. In 1986, the FIA introduced new specifications for fire suits, which are known as the FIA 1986 certification, though I've had trouble trying to figure out how the two systems mesh together, meaning if whatever the SFI is, what is it in FIA, or whatever it is in FIA, what is it in SFI? I've had trouble finding it, so I'll come back to that in a certain point. Okay, now we have to move on to other aspects of driver suits. Fire suits, because we're not talking about driver suits anymore. In 1994, the FIA mandated fire suits for all pit crew members, as did IndyCar for their crew members. This was because both IndyCar and Formula One were doing refueling, though Formula One stopped in, I believe, 2009. And then by 2002, NASCAR mandated fireproof suits for their pit crews. I actually thought that they had mandated this earlier than they actually did, because I have several crew suits in my collection that were clearly predated this mandate. But the mandate was not enforced until 2002. This was because not only the 2001 Daytona 500 Dale Earnhardt situation, but also the 2001 Pennzoil Freedom 400, where there was a major fire during that race. NASCAR is one of the last major sanctioning bodies to mandate fireproof suits for its pit crew members. Now, another weird fire suit-related incident of note took place during the 1989 Motorcraft Quality Parts 500. ESPN and ABC broadcaster Dr. Jerry Punch, who was a real doctor, was reporting from Richard Petty's pit stall when a fire broke out, injuring two crew members. Dr. Jerry Punch, being the awesome guy that he is, treated those two crew members on the spot. It was noted that several items of Punch's clothing were either singed or melted during the fire. Following the incident, ESPN mandated that its pit crew members wear fire retardant suits from here on out. Most major networks have followed the practice, though Fox's NASCAR broadcast is not one of them. I don't know why, but And I think NBC might be in that group too. I haven't had the time to check. So with the So in the mid-1980s, companies began designing fire suits to prominently display the team sponsors as predominantly as possible, but we'll get to that next week. I'm Dave Firestone. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you next week with another episode of Driver Suit Blog Radio.